Hello, welcome to the No Way Jose podcast. Today I'm joined by my friend Austin Wade Picard for part 6 of what really happened in the Dutroux Affair, our ongoing series on the Dutroux Affair. Today we'll take a little bit of a step back from our chronological dig, although I know in the last episode we took a little bit of a dive into a setting and an event. Today we're going to dive back into another person's bio, do a little early life, see where that takes us. One such Michel Nihoul, the white collar face of the unspeakable horror that is the Dutroux Affair. All that and more with as we get into the show. I look forward to I hope you guys enjoy it. We'll see you. Really, it's the same thing we've always kind of come back to on our show, like the idea of how all roads seem to lead back to Gladio, and it's almost like Gladio's this multifaceted op with so many different layers. There's like drug trafficking, sex trafficking, network, like blackmail, like all different. There's satanic elements, and this is kind of one of the best examples of this.
How do you bear to live with what you already know?
I can't say.
You can't say.
Welcome back to the show, Austin. Pleasure to be with you as always. Digging into the Dutroux Affair. I guess we can go ahead and hit the ground running. Dig right into Michel Nihoul. Kind of start wherever you want. Whether you want to start off with kind of an introduction to the character, or just get right into early life, wherever you want to go into, buddy.
Right. Sounds good, man. I think it is important just to remind ourselves that obviously Michel Nihoul was this very well-to-do Brussels businessman at the time, right? As far as high standing in the community, and seemed to have very prominent connections with that of the political elite in Belgium at that time. And I think it's really interesting because he himself provides us with, I believe, to be the smoking gun avenue toward a larger network at play in terms of Dutroux. And Dutroux himself really seems to have been much more of a procurer within the conceptual operation and how it kind of played out in that context. And I think that it's important for us to remind ourselves we've seen this before in terms of these networks. And I think Michel Nihoul and his connections and the gang that then forms in the early 80s with Dutroux and Nihoul kind of running this operation and utilizing these assets in the procurement sort of avenue of the enterprise. It's important to remember that of my favorite example these days, as far as just John Wayne Gacy, and that of how much it mirrors and sort of parallels to that of what I think Dutroux offered in terms of this specific network. And by the way, I mean, the Finder's international in scope. I truly do believe there's more than one connection to Belgium and Marc Dutroux, and really they're running in parallel at the exact same time if you consider the timing of the network itself and the enterprise playing out. So it was always interesting to me, and I had discovered obviously that Deconic connection to Dutroux through that of Dave McGowan, the late great Dave McGowan, who addressed Belgium, to a certain extent, and kind of drew a direct connection, a direct line into the international scope of the operation that was the Finders, and how it linked directly into these NATO peacekeeping operations, if you consider the pink ballets that we'll get into later on down the road, in terms of the sexual blackmail operation playing out. But again, we have yet, and believe me, I'll introduce Nihoul in just a moment. I'm just saying that this is very interesting to me because it just crossed my radar that we have an additional connection to that of Paul Bonacci and the Finders and Dutroux as well. But it comes in the form of, and this again provides us with a window into the scope, and that is apparently Paul Bonacci had a stepbrother who happened to actually become John Wayne Gacy's first victim. And that I know honestly, I had to take a step back and reflect and look into the details of this.
You double check that?
Yeah, I double checked, and it looks like there it is a legitimate connection that we have in terms of this stepbrother. It's the murder of Timothy McCoy is the lens that connects the Paul Bonacci and this stepbrother Timothy McCoy, and so it turns out that and this is written. This is written about as far as I think it's on page. Hold on, let me find it. So I had the source pulled up. It's so crazy, and I figured a brief aside to start us out. But yeah, it's okay. So in 1991, there's a book, and on page 29, it's called "The Mystery of the Carefully Crafted Hoax" by the Nebraska Leadership Conference. And it says Paul Anthony Bonacci was born on August 3rd, 1967, to Marilyn May and John Angelo Bonacci. The father was of Italian descent. Bonacci's parents were divorced while he was just a baby, but his father never even claimed him until he's almost 19 years old. So Bonacci's mother then remarries in a short, brief relationship and marriage. She divorced this man just briefly afterward. It didn't last very long, but due to physical abuse apparently in the home. And she then married Jack McCoy, who allegedly treated her with love and respect, and Paul even claimed he loved his stepfather.
So it's a maternal sibling.
It's a stepbrother, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And
Wait,
and
but it's a stepbrother or is it a blood
no,
sibling?
it's his stepbrother because it was
Oh, okay.
actually Tim
Okay.
McCoy was a
All right.
previous marriage that
Right. Okay.
the new father Jack McCoy had actually had this child in a prior marriage. So again, this is very strange because Paul Bonacci even claimed at one point that it was on the morning of July 5th, 1983, that he called one of the contacts in the network and claimed he wanted out. He said, "My stepfather has just died the night prior, and he didn't want to go to the parties anymore." So he was already very much involved in the sexual blackmail operation. He claimed to have seen the pink index cards that John Wayne Gacy and John were filing in the John David Norman network of the Odyssey Foundation. So if that's true, I very much I think this reinforces that narrative of John Wayne Gacy abducting Johnny Gosch and the paperboy fetish that played out with Jacob Wetterling and all of that. So this is exactly a perfect window into the same kind of facilitation and operation of the network that is Dutroux, because I saw the exact same similarities in terms of this playing out and the abduction process. And so again, I just felt like
We haven't
a
even gotten to
very
the Sicilian connection, which we're going to probably get into at some point later in this
100%.
episode. So yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
And
it
so,
really does just kind of spider web all about. So
no doubt. And once again, it's just clearly at this point, if you do not realize that even Dutroux himself went on the record claiming that, and other members of the network who before they were actually suspiciously killed were speaking to the investigators and telling them about how Dutroux specifically only every single abduction of the children that he was involved in was for order, allegedly, for obviously, but these were children abducted on order through Michel Nihoul, who contacted Marc Dutroux directly to place these orders for abduction. So that seems to have been the process that they followed. But again, this is, if you remember, Olenka Frankiel, right? That reporter and journalist who met personally with Michel Nihoul, in I think it was 2002 or something like that, or maybe it was a little before. But
Well, they got him
she
on record saying some wild shit. That
Mhm.
one, yeah, yeah.
Exactly, where she meets him in a Brussels restaurant, and he says, "I am the monster of Belgium," which is just really my favorite line because it does shine a light into his role in the network itself, and also the prominent, powerful exploitation, the levels of blackmail that he had on legitimately. I mean, we're talking the most prominent individuals like King Albert, right?
The feeling
Which
of being untouchable, like, and kind
exactly.
of, I guess not to, I guess jump ahead, which, spoiler alert, I guess like he's kind of true. I mean, he gets a,
Mhm.
I mean, really in the end, Nihoul, what does Nihoul end up, the real consequences for his actions, like I guess like a major inconvenience.
That's basically it because I
Like that's
mean,
about it. Yeah.
inevitably, I mean, what
I mean, it was
I
more than a
believe,
minor inconvenience, but it was just
yeah,
a major inconvenience. It's about it. A mild
exactly,
annoyance, a major annoyance, like
no doubt,
barely past the point of an annoyance, as it seems like on his level. But I think that
truly,
speaks to something too. And I don't even think he's like obviously one of the tippy top people. It's just kind of he's still untouchable even where he's at. And I think this is why Epstein really makes a very good parallel for talking about the Nihoul story, because it's not. It's almost as if like I guess we've elevated in the decades, with this Epstein stuff. Like it's like we went from going after the Dutroux to now going after the Epsteins or the Nihouls.
right,
So that's the substantial differentiation between the two. So it's why it's. I know we always think about the Dutroux affair, and obviously we're gonna, for a lot of our coverage, kind of be looking at somewhat from the perspective of what's going on with Dutroux, but a lot of this is like really Nihoul's kind of in reality. I guess the main focal point villain, or really should be, I guess, for the purposes of the story. But
right.
kind of to get ahead of it, obviously, this is a story of corruption and government. Certain
No.
people are untouchable. So
Exactly. And I think that, seeing how many different witnesses and allegations were credibly made in terms of this police protection and involvement in the abductions as well, and that seemingly you had police contacts who were connecting directly into pornography rings in Eastern Europe allegedly, and even a social worker who had worked with child pornography victims claimed she had seen a snuff film in which an acquaintance of Michel Nihoul murdered a child and had called the police saying she had been threatened with death via a car accident. Her name was Gina Pardains, I believe, and so she claims that she was threatened with death via car accident just before dying in a car accident, which is, again, I mean, we have like 29 examples of that happening, right? And but I will say, I mean, you see Michel Nihoul, he's fully acquitted of any involvement in the child trafficking, and is in. I believe he was sentenced to just 5 years in prison for conspiracy involving drug trafficking, and after 2 years imprisoned, he's released. So this is, I mean, a ridiculously light sentence as far as and just considering who he is and the role he is fulfilling within this context. And so, yeah, again, it's he's Jean-Michel Nihoul inevitably became an informant as well for the Bigendarrie Osprings Brigade, right? I believe is how you pronounce it, and this is a branch of the Belgian gendarmerie, and it functioned as a rough equivalent to the obviously the FBI, right? And I think that's a very interesting point to make. And anyway, so he's implicated in being involved with just ridiculous. As he said, I believe, "I control the government" was the quote that he had made, or had given in Der Spiegel, the German newspaper, where he claimed everyone has compromising dossiers on one another to be used as leverage in the right situation. And he even offered off the record to provide a videotape of Belgium's King Albert II assaulting a teenage girl for a six-figure sum, allegedly. And many of the victims themselves I mean, apparently they were being offered up for around $5,000 a piece is what the going rate was in terms of the enterprise and what they were apparently offering after they abducted these children. And they would be, you know, they were going into the Czech Republic and various international borders they were crossing in terms of their abduction process and kidnappings that they were involved in. And so it does make a lot of sense that clearly, right, that this just again we're provided another window into the scope of this specific enterprise, being far more entrenched at the time. And yeah, Nihoul effectively died a free man at 78 years old in 2019, right? As recent
Mm.
as 2019. But
Well,
yeah,
now that we got to where he kind of obviously where he ends up and kind of
mhm,
where he resides in the story, I think it's interesting kind of see we've kind of followed the path of Dutroux from kind of his humble beginnings to where he ended up and kind of the shady portions of that. And so I think it's worthwhile to kind of obviously these guys run on different tracks. You know, the Dutroux is more the blue collar, whereas Nihoul's more the white. So I think it's worthwhile to kind of look back and go, what was his starts? Kind of, what can we glean from his past? How did we get from wherever he started to this highfalutin businessman with a wife, this who's a legal expert with bizarre Satanist ties and yada yada yada. Like, well, how do we get from there to here? We kind of try to see if we can't, see the fingerprints of some other thing. At what point does he get brought in? Is he there from the jump? I don't know, but I guess kind of where can we go? Where do you want to start? Kind of what do we know about his early life of Nihoul? Is this guy a ghost? I have a feeling he very well probably is, especially
yeah,
given the time period and his age.
right. Yeah, I think he definitely is. Groomed into position, it feels like, at a certain level. He was kind of chosen out of an exclusive group in a way to I think he fit a profile perfectly. But he really, it's interesting to me because obviously you have it's I'm just trying to, like, I was trying to figure out how to pronounce where he originated from, because again it's in French and everything is difficult to properly enunciate or in any way. But Ververes, I'm not entirely sure. I think it sounds much different in French, but this is basically tracking his really kind of his rise to fleeing to Brussels, right? And this is kind of around the time frame of the 1940s into the 60s, which leads into obviously the early 70s, and I believe is when the enterprise itself was really in full swing. But and then obviously it comes to a climax and is overexposed by the early 80s, and I think that is when they begin to come into real just as far as just trying to manage the perception of what the public is now beginning to realize is kind of leading to the destabilization within the local area. I think it was a little bit difficult for them to completely denounce after the evidence and the connections began to come, or at least fully surface in a way with credible allegations. And it was much more than even the Epstein scandal, as far as just the heightened sense of awareness and the public attention and the appeal being so broad in terms of the just grabbing that public spotlight in that moment. And obviously 3% of the population in the 90s participated in the White March after Connerat was removed from the case. So it kind of makes sense. But the best way I felt like to introduce the character himself before we got into his World War II origins there, and basically in the Nazi-occupied Belgium, which is kind of interesting. It's where Jean-Michel Nihoul was born during World War II in 1941. And it was in a French community as well, in the province of Liege, I believe, is where he was born. But there are a few other quotes that I just thought were very relevant in terms of who he is and who he became as well. But just to like briefly continually introduce him, and then we'll discuss the details here. But yeah, he just to finish that quote earlier about "I am the monster of Belgium." That was his greeting to Olenka Frankiel, and basically he was so, as you mentioned, overconfident, and claiming that he will never come to trial and that the evidence against him will never even be heard by a jury. And yeah, that is when he basically sexually assaulted her by pulling her during the course of the meal onto his lap, tickling her and grabbing her, and very strange in the restaurant booth as far as his behavior. But but yeah, and then he also said that besides the everyone has compromising dossiers on one another, he basically said this is the Belgium disease, right? And I thought, what a wonderful way to kind of put it into context and describe the environment that was Belgium in this time. And who knows? I don't believe they've ever recovered. I mean, we still have Marc Dutroux alive and well. That in itself is a huge defeat, I believe. I mean, not. I mean, what really just the fact that we have nothing but radio silence in terms of Dutroux as well, post arrest and just being in custody. We've heard very little as far as from
it's
Dutroux.
like it seems like there is a one count I've told you about on this. I feel like I probably plugged it earlier on. It's like IRC underscore NIC, and he follows it. And it seems like I remember when I was really digging into all the different threads he had a while ago. It kind of the picture I got is it seems like maybe every handful of years we kind of might get this like story of some quote or something that came out of Dutroux, and he says some salacious shit. They're like, oh shit. But it is kind of like almost like a cliffhanger type, type shit. You're like, he leaves it like, oh, the elites are controlling the world through pedophilia. You're like, oh, and you're like, yeah, I know, dropping some names or something. At least that's the impression I get. Is he kind of is this perennial like, so like I don't know. I guess I prefer that he's alive in the sense that like. I like them to be able to maybe get more info out of him, but also I think it seems like they have some sort of situation where very much like people like Terry Nichols are like over here in the United States. I think they might have it set up to where like it's intentional that people can't really talk to him too much. So did I lose you, Austin?
Yo, I don't know what happened.
That was weird. Okay. All right. Well, I'm kicking out the other you. That was very bizarre.
What
I don't
is
know what
going
just happened.
on? That was crazy.
Cool. Well, that works out well. I saw you froze, and I thought it was me. That works out because I was in a good flow.
No,
but all right, let's get back
to
that.
I'm
was
sorry,
weird.
man. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure what exactly happened, but yeah, everything crashed on my end.
Okay,
But
back to Nihoul.
yeah, my bad. Anyway, so yeah, it seems like to me, and I think again, you have Regina X1 Regina Louf, who she explains Michel Nihoul, and in a brief statement, just claiming he was one of the regular organizers of the parties that she attended, and she claimed that the man she knew as Michel Nihoul was Mish, is what they called him, right? Basically, as a sort of shortened nickname, and the sessions were most sadistic and sinister whenever he was involved, allegedly, and so we're talking torture, murder, sadism, and detailed accounts of children being sacrificed in this context as well. Obviously, I mentioned the snuff film earlier, but. And then you have testimonies given by like Michel Lilievre, who's one of the criminal informants and were clearly members of the network, helping with facilitating the drug trafficking, but also involved in some of the abductions, and later even claimed that they were pressured because he was the one who said that that basically it was Dutroux who had made him feel as if he owed him, right? And he had to remain loyal and participate in the abductions, or else he would effectively kind of lose his position, which means a very sinister fate in the terms of this enterprise. If you remember that of Bernard Weinstein, who's another one of Dutroux's accomplices, who winds up buried alive on one of his properties, and was very much a part of the abductions as well. But Lily Avra claims that this was in a testimony he gave in 1996. He says, "I would like to reveal other things about Jean-Michel Nihoul, but I don't want that. I don't want these testimonies that are taken up in the dossier." He said he doesn't want his testimonies to be taken up in the dossier. He said, "As I said, I fear for my life and those around me. I remind you that Nihoul told me the following: if you cross me, I will destroy you. With those words, he made it known to me that he would kill me or have me killed." So that when you were describing that of Marc Dutroux in prison, and as far as just um, it reminded me of David Berkowitz during The Son of Sam, when he became willing to go on the record and kind of blow the whistle a little bit, provide more details to the network at large. He then is stabbed and in prison, and they slit his throat, and he almost died. And after that moment, he said he was in such terror for the well-being of his father specifically, who was his only family that really seemed to remain, to at least maintain a relationship with him throughout this entire process. And following the scandalous, murders and the serial killer moniker that he was forced to embrace. I mean, it seems like that is a little bit of the playbook as far as keeping individual assets silent who have, unfortunately, as far as in the scope of the enterprise, taken the fall as the patsies for the much wider network. So the same effect that happens with, as far as we're intended to believe that obviously Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein are sole perpetrators acting alone, facilitating this network with no real connections to the powers that be that are obviously keeping them insulated from any real accountability and justice. I believe this is very much playing out in the exact same sort of sense, and so it just it seems to fit perfectly is the main point I'm making here. And so, yeah, obviously many of these witnesses were already under threat whenever they went on the record. But so the main point here is that you have many others, including Michelle Martin, who was married to Dutroux, who claimed that she was afraid for the welfare of her children, that basically her kids were under threat. And she claimed that Jean-Michel Nihoul and his gang is what she said. She said, "I have heard Marc personally telling Lily Avra that he should bring a girl for Michel Nihoul. If I haven't mentioned that before, this is because I'm afraid of that gang. I mean Nihoul, Marc Dutroux, and others in Brussels. I mean well-placed individuals whom Nihoul knew. The connections of Nihoul made me fear for my children and myself. I was afraid because Jean-Michel Nihoul, Marc Dutroux, and Michel Lilievre were part of a gang that was involved in all kinds of business like drugs, pills, girls, and forged papers. At the time of the kidnapping of Sabine and Letitia, how do you say her first name? Sabine? How do you say that? Have you heard the proper pronunciation?
I know what you're talking about. I think I said it Sabine. I think something
Yeah,
like
I
that.
think that's it. Yeah, but she basically says that at the time of the kidnapping of the two girls, Letitia and Sabine, who I believe are the two who inevitably wound up starving to death, allegedly, which I don't think is the accurate story. But either way, we'll get into those cases obviously in detail. But Michel Nihoul, as as Michelle Martin already stated, apparently, according to her, and this is just interesting, that he often called to SARS, to her home, right? Personally, her home. And he was allegedly looking for Dutroux, and Nihoul would try to reach Marc. He would remain extraordinarily vague, according to her. So she never knew why he called so often to Marc Dutroux. But over time, she became more and more convinced that Dutroux and Jean-Michel Nihoul did things that couldn't stand the light of day, in which she claims I was not supposed to know about. She said, by the way, Marc told me that he went more and more to Brussels and met an increasing number of people in light of his activities with Michel Nihoul. So it seems as if he himself was being directly introduced by that of Michel to some of these prominent individuals in the X dossier. But now I figure obviously we can go through victim statements later on when we cover the cases specifically and get into the X dossier. But I just thought that it was a great way to at least again highlight how many examples we have of his true role in within the context of this network and the Dutroux affair, because I do believe that Jean-Michel Nihoul, he truly is the monster of Belgium, right? And Marc Dutroux is low hanging fruit, as disgusting as his criminal actions were. It's unfortunate that we have to face that fact, right? Is that he was very much low level within the operation itself, and so yes, it was in 1941 when Michel Nihoul was born in this Belgian Nazi occupied French territory, and it seems like his father was already a chief of office in a textile factory, and so it seemed like he seemingly had very prominent connections already due to his kind of genealogical standing in terms of just his father's background. And so I guess he was
Isn't
kind
there
of
another famous story with a textile factory, or am I thinking of something else?
No, you're 100% right. It seems like it's a part of the organized crime enterprise itself, as far as the umbrella networks and how they provide themselves with these plausible deniability assets and outlets.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
I can't remember where it just seems like that was something I've heard of before,
oh
something to do
yeah.
with the textile factory. So I'm like, I don't know if you
No,
remember
I
what
can't
that was.
recall the direct connection, but I know exactly what you're talking about, because I definitely have at least crossed paths with that very
Yeah.
same pattern in prior research. But yeah, it again, I think it's important to always recognize what what we have seen in many of the same sort of scandalous avenues of research and investigative kind of avenues that provide us with these windows into how they kind of cover their tracks and insulate themselves. And so this does feel like one of the textbook ways you would go about doing such a thing. And so he's clearly a mogul of industry at the time, and that's interesting to me, because this is the mother is not really prominent in any way. She seems to
Wait,
have just
wait.
been.
So back up. What does the dad do again? Is he like a worker in this textile, or is he some
No,
sort
he's
of?
chief of office in the textile factory. Yeah.
So in 1940s Nazi France, Nazi occupied France, his father is a well-to-do businessman in a textile factory.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
Uh-huh.
Just making sure we're laying that out there. Okay.
Yeah,
Nothing
exactly.
untoward or nothing that
No,
could have been
no.
capitalized on there. Nope.
There's
No way,
no
no
way that,
how.
yeah, no way he could have, molded his child to
Yeah.
take the reins in terms of introducing him into prominent individuals, and within the context of the government itself, I think is already
There's
when.
a reach here, but do we know anything about their ethnic background? I mean, there's a little bit of a reach, but
Right.
you never know.
It's interesting because so much of his background specifically seems to be either not properly translated into English, because it does seem like there are a couple of books out there that have, tried to cover a bit of his background, but
Hmm.
the vast majority of it really begins in 1996, which is fascinating to me, that they don't even discuss his personal background or his parental, kind of just how he was raised and in any level whatsoever. They don't even mention his parents, which is fascinating. So it took a while for me to even stumble onto a proper background in terms of Michel Nihoul. And so again, it's difficult to even get names of his family members, which is very strange, right? You would think it would be far more documented at this point, but again, he's just apparently they really don't even document much of his life as far as his early years until he's around 20 years old, and then they kind of pick back up onto his path, and essentially they discuss how after the government had returned to King Leopold III being abdicated as far as the throne itself, and the eldest son was Prince Bedouin, Bedouin, I believe was his name, or and it looks like Nihoul was married around 1962. And this is when he marries his first wife, Adrian. And this woman he has 3 children with. And apparently, by the early 60s, he's working as some sort of house painter and graduated in interior design, which is very strange to me because he gets into real estate later on. And knowing how Dutroux owns over 10 properties and I believe is worth 6 million francs or something at the time of his arrest, then it does make sense that Michel Nihoul would have been involved in real estate. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously, this points to that of the background of one Donald Trump. Maybe you could consider just as far as being involved in Royal Casino International, which obviously was a Meyer Lansky criminal syndicate connection there to the kosher mafia, which is just you know people think that these organized crime syndicates don't function in this sort of unilateral way where they coexist,
Yeah.
in this strange environment. But
Well,
it is.
the Nihoul's first little probably plink in there of like a notable, I don't know, faux pas or I don't know, a impropriety being caught was in early like that was it 96 I think.
Yeah.
Where it was for a fucking some sort of charity thing, which let's be real, that's probably some sort of like I mentioned before, kind of characterizing as white collar. Sounds like some white collar crime, which the white collar aspect kind of sanitizes it, like haha, just some businessmen trying to keep their money. And you're like, well, that was probably illicit funds for some crazy, crazy stuff. Namely the awful things behind the Dutroux Affair. So a little
Hmm.
bit different, but yeah, I think it's I don't know. Yeah, I think that's worth. I don't know. That's something interesting there. The way they move in that way.
Oh, no doubt. And I believe it was around the early 60s as well that Nihoul was apparently going around to these roulette tables during the weekends at a specific casino called Middlekirk, where his father had become a croupier or of some kind, which I'm not entirely sure what that is. I thought it basically referenced he's a sort of prominent, notable regular that attends this casino, and but let me actually confirm that because I myself wanted to make sure that I knew exactly what that term meant, croupier. Because again, it's like if you're considering how organized crime utilizes casinos for money laundering, then it makes a lot more sense that he would effectively be involved if with a casino at that time,
Yeah. Well, it's
maybe even just
just like the Vegas shooting. I mean, that guy was gambling. He was doing
exactly.
if you tracked his like days prior to the shooting, he was doing all sorts of gambling all over the place and all these different and weird casinos and over this spot, frantically driving to this place to gamble, frantically driving to this place to gamble, like
Hmm.
over and over
Hey
again.
man,
You're like,
this
whoa.
right. This term is apparently it's even worse than we thought, I guess, because a croupier is an attendant at a gaming table who collects and pays bets. So, I mean, we're talking an enforcer at a certain level in a way, right? If you consider maybe some sort of mob ran casino, then you would have to imagine that they're dealing with unpaid bets so often that essentially you would have to have mob enforcers on staff at the casino itself. So this could be some low level, let's say, what's the term, initiation of some kind, right, where you go through the process and they fundamentally realize how vital you could become for the enterprise itself. I mean, it would make sense that this would be one of the early stages of that sort of coming to fruition in a way. But so yeah, I don't know. That's obviously speculation, but it's interesting to say the least. And and so then he decides that he'll become, due to his experience and expertise in house painting and interior design, he becomes a representative of U.S. Paint Company, and U.S. Paint Company would later on fire him for lack of performance, is what the statement said. And so this is around the age of 23 in 1964 when he takes over a hotel of his parents. And he also opened up a coffee shop. So it looks like, he's into the obviously this some entrepreneurial this kind of spirit, but at the same time, he's just effectively kind of accepting, this prominent position that his father is providing him. Clearly, is what's taking place here. But for him to take over a hotel, it does it does implicate a sort of criminal enterprise already. In a sort of way, because just considering the idea of how they could rig for, hotels for audiovisual blackmail, for this is long-standing in terms of sexual blackmail and kind of the entrenchment of that sort of currency in the systems of power. It's like, I don't know. I mean, we've pointed to so many different examples of that, and so it's difficult to just dismiss this at face value as well. But both of these businesses, both the coffee shop and the hotel, apparently went out of business and went bankrupt within just a few years of, of him taking over as the controlling figure of the organizations themselves. So I
It's
thought
not
that,
easy
again,
running a front, Austin.
that's what I mean. It's like it was intended to fail, is what it looks like, right? Who knows? Maybe it wasn't, because I think there was an economic downturn there in the since the 50s in Belgium at the time. There was like a significant economic crisis, and obviously this is following World War II, so you'd have to imagine there's some sort of significant fallout as far as the um, reconstruction, the major reconstruction happening at the time in Eastern Europe. But yeah, it looks like these were potential fronts that he was a part of running, and so yeah. Then he later on, this is very strange, because he ends up opening up one. He apparently was working for some company that was running a truck driving service. And then later on, in the 60s as well, he opens up a disco, right? That's also a spa. Now, that comes up in the dossier as far as victims being legitimately taken to a spa, taken to these various properties that were Michel Nihoul owned and ran, and that includes that. I believe it was a nightclub, right? Which two of the girls had been taken to and spotted at, when allegedly during the time they were supposed to have been starving to death, which led to people making allegations, including the families, that they were actually taken to a location where they were effectively sacrificed in the context of a snuff film. And that basically they were taken to a party at one of the nightclubs in the area, ran by Michel Nihoul, and they were sadistically abused there and then taken to their final destination, where they filmed a sacrificial snuff film. So I believe it at this point, as far as just seeing so many disturbing details in regards to the snuff film enterprise in the Dutroux Affair. But yeah, it looks like there were many different prominent individuals who would attend his nightclub and disco and spa. And this was, according to Nihoul, it was the place to be. And the quote, the opportunities of the competition were empty. He also stated that all the stars, actors, and celebrities at the time were children, which is very strange that he actually went on the record saying such a thing. But so this already seems like an avenue of procurement at a certain level, and especially if you have prominent and notable celebrities who are attending the disco, and yes, this is kind of how you would orchestrate such a criminal enterprise at this level. And so it seems to be another example of accumulating these kind of sexual blackmail opportunistic properties that they would then exploit further on down the road in this context. So Nihoul then, in the late 60s, he decides to travel to Brussels, where he continues to be a part of this truck driving company for a few different years, and also continue to paint and do these strange wallpaper jobs with one of his brothers, I guess. And then you have Brussels.
I have a feeling he was probably doing with these interior things. There were probably some sort of weird art, and it was probably high paying. because kind of more to this laundering. All these are like perfect fronts. It sounds like to me, kind of damn near textbook front type things. Art, all the things that are extremely subjective things that you are
Right.
able to load tons of money in. I mean, hell, this is like an open conspiracy people talk about all the time that like art dealing at the high level is just money laundering because it's
Right.
just because all it is you can be like, I can take this mouse and draw a dick on it and go, this
Hmm.
is $30,000, and like, is it really worth $30,000? But if there's somebody that says, wink, wink, it's $30,000, but in reality, I only get $2,000, and he
Hmm.
gets to bypass taxes or clean his money or whatever.
Right.
I'm none the wiser, and I'm just some art student. And then now you add in some of the untowardness of the weirdness of these trafficking rings, and you add in, and it was pretty common that like Epstein had a thing for artists,
Yeah.
so I don't know. It's kind of
Definitely.
like that would be a bread and butter for a money launderer,
Oh man,
and
you remember
if
the
if you can
Podesta
also
artwork?
if you can also tie that into your trafficking network, all the better for them. So.
Exactly. And you remember the Podesta artwork as well,
Mm-hmm.
which by the way, that Kansas City Butcher satanic art collection that you showed on Already Dead the other day,
Yeah.
somebody had commented, I think it was on I think it was on I think it was on my YouTube. They had commented that basically that looked like that chair that you showed looked like that of a brainstem, and sort of like man, he went into detail about kind of like it sort of depicted the very same crimes that he was guilty of committing, which is very interesting as far as like his obsession with decapitation, because it seemed to have
Mm-hmm.
almost represented that
Well, yeah,
specifically.
he was splitting the vertebrates too, which makes you think he's doing something with the brain stem. Because it's like if you're chopping the invertebrates, like I mean, I don't know. I've never torn a body apart, but I
Right.
can't really think of a practical reason for that other than if I'm trying to maintain the thing inside of it. Because from my understanding, biology wise, you have your brain stem, your whole like central nervous system. It runs through your spine essentially.
Exactly.
So if you did split it, that would be how you would cleanly extract it. So yeah,
Oh
maybe
man.
there's something to the symbolism there. I don't know. That might be a
That
little bit
was
of a reach,
always
but
the most oh, definitely, but at the
but
same time, the most fascinating and kind of enjoyable application to the symbology behind that of the skeletal structured system to the vertebrae, and as far as like to the cerebellum,
mhm.
and that of like kind of like it symbolizes the divine spark of intellect in a way, as far as that specific connection to the brainstem, and
And
apparently
also
it's
kind of looks a lot like a sperm if you think about it. So there's all sorts of symbolism too.
definitely.
So you kind of think about it,
And
yeah.
you know what's craziest to me is that I once years ago I heard someone in a very descriptive and detailed way describing how the crucifixion was actually this kind of symbolic representation of basically Golgotha in Hebrew means skull, and that's where he was sacrificed.
Hmm.
And then he's 33 years old. There's 33 vertebrates, and right as far as and then I believe as far as your C1 is the 33rd that connects to the cerebellum, which represents the divine spark and the timing of it all as well. Again, I'm butchering it. It was much better presented as far as whenever I stumbled onto it, but still, it's something that was difficult to just dismiss because it seemed like far too applicable and accurate to that of the story of the crucifixion being a layered symbolic philosophical lesson that could even be more profound than just like a direct textbook interpretation of something, and I think that that's where I find a lot of value in some of the different things that I just appreciate more about spiritual, just as far as like let's just say what's it called in terms of just the doctrine itself, right? I think I appreciate that interpretation at a layered level, that might actually provide you with even more of a profound lesson in a certain way if you take it in that sort of sense. And but anyway, That's obviously an aside. I just thought it was fascinating because clearly there's more to it as far as some of these individuals and the way that they think in terms of expressing themselves in this sinister way. And so it's something that we can't really deny. And at this point, if you consider the international scope of because I was thinking maybe some of these jobs could even have been a sort of where there's what's it called when you are kind of like scoping out the for an operation of some kind. You're kind of going in and vetting the
Reconnaissance.
yeah, you're running recon on the location itself, and who knows, it could have been like no, we would like to abduct a certain priority target, and so therefore we would like a convenient access of some kind to the inner workings of the home. That makes sense as far as just in reference to that of the finders, because remember, international scope. I mean, they had peer-to-peer private network modules that were set up internationally at the Chinese embassy, where they're ordering children for abduction from the Chinese embassy. Specifically Chinese children, and that in itself, I mean, babysitting services. They were advertising themselves for as far as members of the finders to gain easier access to avenues of abduction, and so this would fall into that category potentially of being some sort of process where you could gain easier access. But that makes sense as far as I had mentioned that I had mentioned that Dave McGowan connection earlier, and that came in the context of the Finders case in Florida, right, in Tallahassee, where basically there was an additional arrest where this individual by the name of Wayne Kamali was charged and for operating an online child pornography site. And this individual, it was basically published an article by the LA Times that reported that he was from his West Palm Beach home, which again, you think of Epstein instantly, in which Kamali was arrested. Apparently, it was filled with rotting garbage, trash, cat feces, that and so much so that the agents themselves who were raiding his property had to borrow oxygen masks and hazardous hazmat suits, hazardous material suits, and and then they conducted their search, and they seized countless videotapes in the raid, and a computer as well. And the most significant aspect of this arrest is that it was initiated by police who were actively investigating Belgium's Marc Dutroux affair. Right. And that in itself is fascinating because again, this is he's running a child pornography site online, and if he's being deliberately connected by investigators to the Dutroux affair, and this is a domestic United States case of child pornography and human trafficking, that's a real kind of red flag that is impossible for us to just gloss over. And it seems like Kamali was had various connections, one of which was extremely close to that of an individual by the name of Felix DeConnick, who was a suspect in the kidnapping and molestation of a 14-year-old girl. And DeConnick had links directly to Marc Dutroux. So that in itself is insane, that you have a legitimate connection to the finders and the Dutroux affair. And so if that kind of doesn't describe exactly what the finders potentially were, and that the Dutroux affair was just kind of like a geographical representation of this network at large, and this pedophile, what did I call it at one point? This pedophile establishment of some kind, this underground and pedophile underworld is a better way to put it, I guess. That's been very well entrenched for generations at this point. And I think they have direct connections. They can sort of, pull these threads internationally and provide any sort of, sadistic, perpetrator with whichever fetish and individual victim that they would like to abuse. and that might potentially be what we're seeing here. I mean, just with that of Columbine and Paul Schaefer or Paul Schultz. I mean, we saw the Mexican sort of a Latin America connection to that of Mexican children being strategically prioritized for the network as well. And so, not at all would I be above, kind of speculating as far as that is concerned, being a very viable avenue for these individuals who are facilitating the network. So to get back to Nihoul, I should just finish this final statement on Deconic because it's fascinating, and especially because he's directly connected to Dutroux. And so it looks like U.S. officials refuse to elaborate on the direct connection between Deconic and Dutroux, which makes a lot of sense.
Meme here.
Yeah, it's just crazy. And but they did say that they were a part of the same child pornography, molestation, and murder investigation. And so it seems like the press or the media attention never revisited this in any real way. And as they said in the finders, right, as far as the case itself, no further information will be available. No further action will be taken. And I'll never forget that is what they concluded in terms of the investigation into the finders and what was his name, that customs officer, which
Martinez.
Yes,
Yeah.
which is just so sad to have seen, the kind of consequential fallout of remaining, keeping your integrity intact, let's say, throughout. My God, I just couldn't even imagine being in that position, where you're blowing the whistle, you're refusing to remain silent, and then after a certain amount of time, you decide for your own well-being, it's not even worth it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just a sad way to look at things. But I will say, I will forever, be grateful for the window he provided us into what is real, unfortunately, in this formidable threat that we all truly face in regard to protecting our children, right?
Well, it sounds like you've brought Nihoul damn near to the modern. I guess when I say modern, I guess for the purposes of where we are where we're at in telling this story, we've kind of brought it up to where things start to pop off. We're kind of like mid to early 90s is kind of where we left off before we went into the ice rink, into Nihoul, into what else? We also dug into the Van Hees murder. That's kind of where we're coming to. I'd be remiss if we didn't take a moment. Now, I don't really want to necessarily make this a bio on her herself, because I think we should probably at some point later, not necessarily maybe take it a whole episode for her, but probably, I mean, hell, maybe actually, some of the things that offshoot from her would easily make a whole other episode. But his wife, Ann Booty, I mentioned
Booty.
her earlier. Yeah, Annie Booty.
Yeah.
She's got this weird connection to what's the Church of Abraxas, or the like eternal, Christ something or other. It's got like two different names. It's very bizarre. It's got some weird, like almost sciencey, Christian sciencey name that sounds sort of Christian-y, but then also has like this Gnostic one with Abraxas being mentioned.
Oh yeah.
But this is Ann Booty, Michel Nihoul's wife. I think for some of the story, during the narrative throughout this, I think at some point she's an ex-wife, but she's still connected. Yes. But just kind of, and I figured maybe we should at least touch on their relationship. I feel like that's probably the only major thing that I feel like we have that's not been mentioned in his life that I'm aware of. But I guess we should probably hone in on Ann Booty, and if there's anything else about his life that you feel like we should hone in after that, then we could. But if you could tell us a little bit about, I guess, maybe what you know about how they met, their relationship. I mean, it sounds like he was clicked into some shit from the jump. Mm-hmm. I mean, that might be, obviously it's a little bit speculative. It's not over the top. I mean, whatever. He came from a little bit of a shady start with people that were doing pretty well during a time that under oppressive rule, and he seemed to have properties handed. But sometimes people are in good families and they get property handed to them, and it happens. So, but I mean, just kind of basic pattern recognition. It kind of looks like he was in there from the start. Obviously, the Ann Booty thing is like a fucking much more hard insert point for like, boom, this is some shit going on.
Exactly.
So if you're looking for an overt, like that would definitely be the Ann Booty relationship, since this gets into weird. Obviously, that I think I've mentioned before that church, there were seemingly like immigrants there that were disappearing. So some weird stuff there. But I just kind of, I don't know, talk about his relationship to Anne.
Just look
I know
at
you
this
mentioned he had
dude
another
right here.
wife too, but so I don't know if we really talked about when they broke up.
Mhm.
But Anne was
Oh
the
yeah,
most notable one. So, but
right.
anyways, go ahead, bud.
I just wanted to show a picture of Michel Nihoul for a brief
Yeah,
moment so
real
we can
looker,
remind ourselves that this is who we're
like
discussing, right?
textbook alcoholic like
Yeah,
face. Yeah,
it's so bad.
yeah.
But I will say that it's very interesting to me because and by the way, I have to also mention the fact that it seems like Annie Booty is potentially a man. I mean, it just looking at her, come on, it's kind of insane to view her
I don't know if
as
I've
an
ever seen a
actual woman.
picture of her. Now that I think
Okay,
about it,
let me pull this up because I can't even believe that this is considered to be a woman. But once
some
again,
Michelle Trogneau type shit or whatever. Fucking what the French broad or whatever, Brigitte Macron
it
or whatever.
it is bad, dude. It's even worse than that. So this is
We're talking
I'll,
like that one like Austrian princess looking thing type bad.
I'm
You know,
trying to get a better picture. This one's a little grainy. I'll see if I can find a better one. But look at this. This is Michelle or Annie Booty.
oh yeah, that looks like some drag. That looks like, dude. That looks like the one guy in his like 40s who's been married for like 20 years, going through some weird midlife crisis, and now is doing drag. That's what it looks like.
It's so bad. I'm like,
Yeah,
man, how is that considered to be a woman?
yeah.
Apparently she was a law expert, right, with a very obscure past, and
She's just
you know
lying to black bitches so that her and her satanic friends can murder them and have sex with their corpses.
it seems like
Yeah.
yeah, that I mean for them to have essentially, well, divorced, obviously, but then to have continued their relationship in such a way is very interesting, especially considering that Annie Booty was allegedly present at that of Christine Van Hees as far as her murder is the allegations that were made, and so it's very likely to me that she's pivotal in the context of providing legal expertise for one. My dog just strolled in
Yeah,
freaking its way.
I was freaking out thinking of something in my end. Yeah, you guys are losing your mind. That's Austin's dog chewing on a chew toy and him trying to play it off like nothing's going on. But sorry,
My bad.
at least now you guys know we've addressed it, and you're like, what the fuck is that noise? That's what the noise
Exactly.
is.
So it was in the late '60s, just before he meets Annie Booty in '71, I believe, is when they first met. But it was in the late '60s when he goes Nihoul effectively goes to Brussels, where he continues this truck driving and wallpaper business and with his brothers. But it seems like Brussels itself is becoming this increasing international hub by the late '60s, and NATO even relocating their headquarters to Brussels from Paris, and that I think is so pivotal in the context of this potential kind of modern gladio operation. I think it was just a consequence of the rat lines in a certain sense, and this staging a very similar strategic playbook as far as utilizing brothels and various assets to clearly position yourself in terms of the pivotal leadership in the area as well, and it reminds me again of Kinkora and that of the Kinkora Boys Home and the hotel set up near the boys' home, which was also rigged with audiovisual blackmail, and you had members of the MI6 who have a whole floor, just isolated for that very purpose, where they're running a surveillance of their strategic human honeypot assets, and it's also where they would implement the elevator trick, and things of that nature. So it just goes to show this is the way of controlling the outcome of these political, not only administrations, but just the political kind of class in general. right? And how you very much bring them under just this kind of vital sense of control, right? As far as your ability to move them into this strategic location for your own benefit, and that is what you see so very often playing out here. And so it was by the 1970s that I think we begin to see the network form in a more solidified way, and so it's I believe. Nihoul managed. I think he met Annie Booty. I believe it was in 1971, as I had mentioned before, but it was 3 years after 1971 that they would actually begin a sort of relationship. So they did already know each other, but this was kind of when it began to really manifest itself was a few years after they had originally met. But it does seem like potentially there are more details that are being left out of this story in a certain way, and because so much of what we're relying on here is pretty much based on an untranslated autobiography and things like that, right? Where I'm just kind of piecing together this a narrative that makes a little bit of sense and provides some sort of context and details to the path that they took leading up to the scandalous criminal kind of just cases themselves. So it was by 73, so around 3 years later, Nihoul is given his first criminal sentence. So he's instantly within meeting Annie Booty, within that kind of 2.5 year period, he's already getting sentenced for fraudulent bankruptcy, issuing bad checks. So if you consider those two prior businesses that had gone bankrupt, then it makes a lot of sense that he's just kind of fitting this. He's really recycling a sort of strategic playbook in a way, in a pattern that many people are kind of identifying at this point in his life, and even investigators who are beginning to see that he's clearly attempting to run some sort of criminal enterprise, and these are false fraudulent bankruptcies that he's basically declaring. And so then this is when he manages to set up this corporation called United Corporation, and this seems to provide a kind of organized, really an organization in as far as just it provides the enterprise with that of a more solidified, kind of stomping ground and foundational outreach to how they will facilitate the rise to power and controlling various and compromising various people and things of that nature. So this he did, by the way, under the name of his wife. At the time, this is under the name of Adrian. So he's still married to his prior wife that he had 3 children with by 1973, when he's being sentenced for this criminal action, and also kind of fraternizing with that of Annie Booty. So it seems like they had already had a prior relationship, and it could have effectively led to the divorce that he had with Adrian, his first wife. At the very least, it seems like it was beneficial at the time to kind of part ways, because she was effectively not offering anything to what he just his more, let's just say, entrepreneurial spirit in terms of the criminal enterprise that he was facilitating. She was not providing any sort of real let's just say she was no asset of any kind. And so he kind of moved on, and I think that is why he developed the relationship with Annie Booty, because she provided a real service to the enterprise that he was pursuing. And really, I mean, if you consider Dutroux, he kind of took a similar path where they had these prior relationships where they kind of both sort of the examples of abuse were in the household and things like that. And so it seemed like they were more running roughshod over their partner than they were actually, in some sort of relationship that was legitimate, so in any real way. But yeah, I think this United Corporation is a real problem, and something that should definitely be addressed, because this is when he becomes an expert in real estate. It's only due to his connection to this company. So I'm not entirely certain how you can become a real estate expert through just accepting a position with no prior experience in, in real estate. Like, you're a truck driver who performs house paintings. You know what I mean? Like, it's just very strange that you would all of a sudden, after owning a hotel that your father originally founded and owned, you would then, I mean, talk about being kind of handed these opportunities on a silver platter. Yeah, it definitely feels like he was groomed into position to a certain level, and only when it's viable to benefit other members surrounding him involved in the network does it seem like it kind of yeah, he that is when he seems to take over a position of some kind of prominent influence. And so yeah, we're supposed to believe that he became a real estate expert during this time, but he would then subsequently go bankrupt, right, once again, fraudulently, and his wife would take the fall, which is insane. So that is her strategic, kind of uh, um, just as far as the what she's providing for Nihoul in any sort of sense, as in terms of his yeah, and just what he's attempting to achieve with the network. That's really the only thing that she can help with, is taking the fall for this criminal conspiracy, which is very interesting to me. But yeah, she seemed to end up
It
even
makes me
going.
wonder if the X part is part of a put on. Like I wonder with the time frame if that falls in line with that. If she's if that's like at the same time as a bankruptcy, if there's a divorce, because that would make
Yeah.
sense.
Oh, definitely, because that is when they allegedly did separate, and also
Mm,
she inevitably went to jail for this. And so, I mean, it's not like she skated in any
mm,
kind of legal consequence. She actually endured, an unfortunate criminal sentence. I mean, who knows how unfortunate.
yeah,
She could have very well have been, you know, um,
hook the fuck up.
involved more than we're aware.
Yeah.
But so while his wife's in prison, Nihoul declares another personal bankruptcy as the sole director of United Corporation. This is in '74, and so he this is by a royal pardon that Michel Nihoul would only serve 2 months of his 1 year sentence in prison, with a 4 month delay from the punishment he got in 1973. So he's already getting this easy path to clearly they gave him
A
some kind of
royal pardon. So
a
meaning he
royal
had to get a
pardon.
pardon from the king because it was in Belgium.
Keep in mind,
So
King Albert, right? He claims
yeah,
to have video evidence of him sadistically sexually abusing a young boy, but no, I think 12 years old or something is what he said.
yeah,
Um,
completely irrelevant, but
completely irrelevant. It would be like if Ghislaine Maxwell gets a pardon and we're like,
yeah,
no, that
uh,
makes no sense as
she's got a
far as
bum
Trump's
deal.
involvement. It's crazy. But so yeah, he only serves 2 months. His wife gets out in '75, apparently picked up by her brother, and then she leaves with their 3 children to go live with their grandmother. So they didn't get like legally declared divorced during that time, but I believe the separation was in effect already after she sort of was enduring the criminal sentence. But so beyond going bankrupt, he's really kind of making a name for himself by this time in the mid 70s, especially in '74. And maybe it's due to the kind of criminal involvement that has been exposed in a sort of sense, but it's when he's becoming, I think, just much more of a vital asset in the network itself. And so Nihoul would then strike up that relationship with Annie Booty once more, and this is around the exact same time that his wife goes to prison, right, and goes to jail for his bankruptcy crimes of yeah, which is just fascinating to me. And again, you have Booty, who was apparently some sort of trainee of a counselor, who was a counselor to an individual by the name of Mobutu Sese Seko. And this is strange to me because he specifically, and keep this in mind. So let me restate this because it's fascinating and I think a huge red flag. Annie Booty was a trainee of Jacques Mars or some Mares. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he was a counselor to Mobutu Sese Seko, who was the CIA and Belgian colonist sanctioned dictator of Zaire, Congo. So that was who she was trained by.
Who I'm pretty sure, as I've mentioned, one of the things they were known for, and I think it might have been Congolese, but it was some sort of African migrants that was that apparently that area in Belgium where she had this Church of Abraxas or whatever the hell. This was an area which was known for being full of African migrants, and
Right.
they were offering Booty was offering services to help. I forget how it was worded, but essentially to situate themselves or something like that. Essentially helping them out, providing
Right.
services, vaguely defined services to help them. You mentioned trafficking. Obviously a lot of these are women of the night, considering the demographic. So. And so there's this weird. So maybe even who knows? I mean, obviously it's completely conjecture, but could be some sort of almost a brothel essentially forming there. But I don't know what services she was offering. But I'm sure there was a. These are some of the people who were probably disappearing, and then obviously now we're seeing this even more of a straight through Congo, dictator, fucking connection. Gets a little bit more shady.
Oh hell yeah, and Annie Booty had developed these high level connections to these prominent individuals, politicians, members of the Justice Department, high level ranking members of the at the embassies, right, and banking, even apparently an owner of one of the major soccer franchises, which makes sense, man. We see so often this overlap and layered connection to all kind of really the spectrum. It kind of represents the full gambit of all different major industries that are kind of implicated in being involved in some of these criminal enterprises. We see so often, the implication of these sports franchises, potentially their ownership being, completely. I mean, one, I always point to that of Heidi Reichen in the black book she was accumulating in Dallas leading up to the JFK assassination before she went to DC to run the Columbia Plaza operation through the Watergate. She had in her black book that she was accumulating sexual blackmail, compromised assets and prominent individuals in this black book as far as just accumulating these compromised individuals. She legitimately had the owner of the it was Frank Murchison Sr. I think he was the owner of the Cleveland Browns, maybe it was the Dallas Cowboys at the time. I can't remember now. I think both of the owners were actually implicated, but still it's exactly what we're unfortunately seeing for far too long, as far as anyone who is still kind of at any real level engaging in professional sports, acting as if there isn't some sort of hidden hand that does control the outcome in some sort of sense. And that is playing out in terms of Annie Booty and her connection to a major soccer franchise at the time as well. So if you just consider that the level of control that you would hope to have if you wanted to really kind of implement full spectrum dominance in a way, which I think was the modern Gladio playbook, as far as in its manifestation, in its full form. It does it's all encompassing in a way, and I think that no one is left unscathed at the highest level if you have one of these operations in full swing. And that's where I think we're witnessing this once again with Annie Booty being this kind of prominent, formidable asset to that of Michel Nihoul and his rise in terms of the network itself, and also being lucrative as far as her legal kind of not only influence, but just her legal expertise and what she can kind of obviously offer him in that
Ghislaine
sense.
coded.
Yeah, definitely, man. Like
Yeah.
it does feel like that. I think a lot of the individuals surrounding Dutroux were really just, I mean, kind of degenerate, low level sinister kind of perpetrators themselves who wanted to benefit from the operation by directly having easy access to individuals they would hope to abuse as well. And I think that Mark Dutroux was a little bit more intellectual in terms of his ability to accumulate these low level, unenlightened and unintelligent kind of yeah, just individuals like a Bernard Weinstein that he would surround himself with that would not present to him to be any sort of threat to the enterprise or his function within that context, but they would also be more than willing and easily deceived as well, I think. And that's potentially what he was doing. He was manipulating certain people that he had dirt on, that he already was probably committing some of these crimes with, and then inevitably blackmailed them into helping with some of the abductions. And that's what it seemed to have happened, especially with Michel Lelievre, in accordance to his witness testimony. But with aside from the bankruptcy and the strange Zaire Congo connection to that of Annie Booty, we have Booty. It's very strange because sometime in '75, Nihoul and Annie Booty decide to move in together. This is when they begin to actually shack up in a sort of sense, and and so it was some sort of meeting that for a company that Nihoul was interested in some sort of individual in '74 by the name of Achille Hamers. And Achille has apparently he's a wealthy Flemish textile merchant. So if you consider the idea that the textile merchant is coming back into play here, his father once again was this chief of, what was it? Um, I can't remember his position, but obviously he was he fulfilled a major role as far as being one of the high level members of this textile company. Obviously, his father prior to his rise to the enterprise. So for him to be orchestrating some sort of business meeting with a company by the name of Confortex or something, I think was the name of it. Who he's very interested in the individual who runs this company, which I find to be the most interesting part of it. I think that's what we might be seeing here as well. Is you have it's almost like the stories of Epstein meeting with these major industry moguls, right? Where
Yeah.
they're like, man, this guy seems to not know anything whatsoever, and at least obviously that was I don't really trust. Weinstein or whatever his name is, Eric or what. I think that was the name of the dude that's connected to Epstein, but still talks about him quite often. Isn't
Well,
that his name?
a good example I think what you're trying to drive at here is I know I forget the name of the guy, but there was a guy who was known to be like his mentor, who was running like a Ponzi scheme that Epstein was involved in, and then ended up being almost certainly the informant who got him burnt. And there was all sorts of things of him saying, "Oh well, Epstein knew it was just as bad," and yada yada yada. But it's like he's the guy who shows up, he gets some dirt, he takes, probably, yeah, I think there was some, if you on the money of it too, I think somehow Epstein profited off of it too. So there's obviously this like this kind of corporate takeover type of impropriety that happens too. So by hook or by crook kind of deal, however they can get it. Whether that means, I know everyone thinks like, oh, you're gonna go and bang the 15-year-old Russian model type looking thing, and then you're gonna get the power and everything's gonna work out fine. Well, they may as well they may burn you too.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
they may burn you and just be like, well, we just want to shit and burn you and take your shit. So,
Exactly.
which seems to happen sometimes. So I mean,
And by the way,
yeah,
this same individual who's Achille Hamers or whatever his name is, who's running this company, Confortex, that Nihoul is so interested in, he's like I said, this wealthy textile merchant, right? He's also apparently very involved in the nightlife at the time in Brussels, right? And it seems like he owned a nightclub, right? Which this individual was apparently very much frequenting at the time, so it looks like he had two sons named Eric and Patrick, right, with his wife, this Achille Hamers, who's as I mentioned, running this textile company, and his brother owned a pub called the Gypsies, which was known to have apparently suspicious regular customers, including Patrick, who was his other son. So it looks like they were somewhat involved at a certain level potentially, and that maybe even this business meeting was orchestrated not to compromise him, but as a sort of reward, as a benefit for being involved in the network itself, and that maybe he had agreed to this business meeting because he was open to merging at a certain level with that of Michel Nihoul's company, and utilizing him in a certain sense in regard to his textile operation. So this is, again, it's hard to discern what exactly is happening in this moment, but it definitely feels like it's on par for how they structure this criminal enterprise. So and the Gypsies, like, what, it's very strange that obviously it doesn't quite matter, but the pub name is alone, it's suspicious. But so Achille himself, the textile merchant, he founds a nightclub called The First, which his other son Patrick would actually take over by 1973. So he had already taken over that nightclub that had been founded a year prior to this business meeting. His other son had effectively taken over the control of, and it was called The First. So I'm only thinking in the context of serial child abuse, right? Is The First, right?
Mhm.
Like, that's my only aside here. Is obviously it probably means nothing, but at the same time, uh, I refuse to dismiss things at face value any longer when it comes to these sinister yeah, just organizations and networks that obviously are pursuing the most deviant style of abuse that you could even comprehend or imagine. But so who knows? Maybe it has no effect whatsoever, but it could be the same sense of Jeffrey Epstein acquiring an island in the Virgin Islands, right? Did you see what's his name? Pair of Power Mapping making that connection the other day? I was like, that's a great point, as far as just considering the notion that you think it was a coincidence he chose to set up shop in the Virgin Islands. I mean, just the notion itself. I mean,
Mhm.
you're deflowering a young woman in a way, right? And that is almost the sort of a philosophical nature of your network. I mean, it's hard to just entirely take for granted in a way, because it does feel like, yeah, they really don't leave anything up for interpretation if you consider it in a deep way. But
Mhm.
anyway, yeah, I think that Annie Booty, as you said, I made a mistake in considering the notion that she was potentially kind of wrapped up into this, in the prior episode we did, and not, maybe not necessarily entirely criminally responsible for some of this. I'm starting to not believe that in any way. I didn't quite believe that in the first place. I was kind
She's
of
in the
trying to play
fold.
devil's advocate, but yeah, she's definitely a part of this. There's no way around it, and it
I mean,
feels
she
like,
went to jail for dude. Like
you know,
like
for real.
she's ride or die. Like
He,
she's
yeah,
like
whatever you want
they're
to.
SRA and people together. Like they're doing like
Mhm,
top shelf evil couple stuff. So really
exactly.
dark, but in a weird way, kind of beautiful.
Loyalty, man. That's hilarious. But yeah, no, he convinces Booty to leave her mentor, who was the she was trained by, basically, who effectively was the mentor of that individual who ran the Congo, and which is very strange, the CIA asset. But still, this mentor Jacques Mars, apparently is, when she parted ways with him due to Michel Nihoul's influence, allegedly, she sets up her own attorney's office. And this is when she specializes in seeking asylum for refugees in
There you
Africa.
go. Yeah.
So there you go. It looks like hey, what happens if we inevitably have some sort of criminal implications here in a credible sense, and we have to evade any sort of real consequence in a legal way, then we could obviously escape down to Africa in some sort of real sense, and yeah, seek asylum there. So it reminds me of Francis Sheldon in North Fox Island. Later on in
Mhm.
life, he's never held accountable, and he just pops back up and resurfaces with some sort of young, uh, you know, um, orphan on his lap at some child care organization, which is just disgusting. But it goes to show they don't leave anything to kind of chance, in a way, when it comes down to these very well organized networks. I think they have an end game in mind. And worst case scenario, if the sky falls, we have some sort of way out of this. And yeah, it's disturbing to imagine, but I definitely think it's a priority. And how could it not be? If you're actually engaging in some sort of yeah, criminal action such as that. But
Mhm. Well, with that, Austin, I mean, I think we've sounds like we've kind of covered most of everything with there is with Nihoul that we're aware of. Obviously, we're gonna kind of bring it to the kind of meat of the main conspiracy when we come to the Dutroux. I think in
right,
the next episode we're gonna kind of bring it to the dawning of the big conspiracy, the major lead up. But we've kind of we've dabbled enough. Kind of let out left a little bit of the crumbs of his early life. It's kind of up to you, the listener, to kind of determine what do you think. Was it kind of always? Was it at Annie? What's the deal? But Austin, I mean, unless there's anything else particularly you feel like you want to let the audience know about Nihoul's backstory, I think we're at a good spot. We can leave it for next week. So you can either if it's some other thing you feel like we should have covered today, you can drop it, and after that, you can go ahead and drop your plugs, and we'll get out of here, bud.
hell yeah, brother. Yeah, I think we're really at the perfect moment to segue into the kind of, it's not rekindled, but the relationship that formed with Nihoul and Paul van den Benitz, because that's where you start to see the modern Gladio just kind of network itself really come into form, and it's disturbing, but it was by 1978. I think this is probably the best place to end, to seamlessly segue for the next episode, which is essentially the meeting between him and Van den Benitz. And again, this is we're talking political aristocracy, highest level of government in regard to Belgium itself. And so Nihoul would spend a little bit of time, like I mentioned before, in jail for that fraudulent bankruptcy charge while he was running the United Corporation. So as he's serving that time, he contacts a man by the name of Joseph Michel, and Joseph Michel was involved in the apparently he was involved in the PSC and was a founding member of SEPIC, right? The very same which was founded by Paul van den Benitz and Baron the Black Baron, right? Baron Benoit de Bonvoisin. And my God, if you want to talk about who could potentially rival that of Michel Nihoul in terms of sadistic depravity in the network, and the sinister abuse that took place, it is the Black Baron. And that man will haunt my dreams for the for the rest of my life, unfortunately, after reading through the X dossier. But we'll find our way to that moment. But I think this is the perfect place to kind of bring to an end, and because this is the time, at the time, Nihoul. Michel Nihoul contacts Joseph Michel, that very individual who's involved with Paul van den Benitz and Benoit de Bonvoisin, and so he contacts Michel, and who's the Minister of National Education, by the way, from 77 to 79. So that's how prominent this individual was at the time. Not only was he involved in SEPIC, but he was clearly, very much clearly involved in that of the Belgian political scene at the time. And so imagine you're the Minister of Education and your direct contact is with Michel Nihoul, like who's contacting you while he's serving time for fraudulent bankruptcy, and you're responsible as the Minister of Education for the entire the French Belgian not French Belgium, but just population of Belgium in general, as far as the children are concerned, and so Michel would become responsible. Joseph Michel, that very same individual who's involved with Sepik and Benoit de Van Voisin and Paul Van den Benitz, would be the individual who was responsible for the early release of Michel Nihoul. So we can start there when we get it, as far as part 7, buddy. But it's too much, man. Like, honestly, this is the best example of modern Gladio and the strategy of tension and how they will prioritize every aspect of the enterprise, kind of coming to fruition under this umbrella. And that's what I think is most valuable as far as Dutroux itself and the affair and this scandal, because this isn't impossible to deny. This is one of those that, this is not a conspiracy theory. This is reality. And the level of darkness, talk about formidable threat. So I love you, brother. Thank you as always.
Where can people find you at, bud?
Oh, yeah. The Underclass podcast, you guys know, check it out. And then also, if you have the means to support me, obviously the Patreon is the best place. Patreon.com/the-underclass-podcast. And yeah, I appreciate you all as always, man. You're my brother. Thank you, dude.
Hell yeah. Appreciate you coming on as always. We'll get this again soon. For those who want to support what I'm doing, you can leave a like, share, subscribe, comment, leave a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify. You can find the show on YouTube, Rumble, all the audio podcasts. You can find it on Twitter at Tower Gang Jose. If you want to support the show the best way you can do that with money over at patreon.com/NoWayJose2020. The QR code right there if you'd like to use that. And at the low level of $2, you get access to early episodes. I usually do about 1 to 2 of those a week. Keep them behind the paywall. I'll try to keep before at any given time. You also get access to the ad-free RSS feed. You get access to the Telegram. You get access to the pre-show, post-show, and video calls of me and Austin's weekly live call-in show, Already Dead, which is on Tuesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. I also give a big shout-out to my patron, my sponsors, the highest level over on Patreon. And I give them a big shout out for everything they do. And my previous co-host on Tower Gang at Learn to Toad, also at Abrogate D's, at CLVRCK, at _Infinite Zeal, Tim Tuttle, at Jolly Klebold, big fan of the show, Torn May, at Wayne Tagless, 1-800-CAR for Kids, No Free Lunch, Jack, Mark Vestibule, and Jacob Winograd of the Biblical Anarchy podcast. He actually just had Dave Smith on the show recently. Go check that out. It was a fun episode. He got lots of views on it. Give him a like, give him a subscribe, show him some love. With that, guys, we're out of here. Love you all. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.